A very good morning, dear students. Today we will continue with drama. Okay, this lecture is in continuation with what we discussed in the last lecture was about tragedy. Today I will discuss comedy. We have dealt with drama, we have dealt how it originated, what are the various structures of drama, how drama grew, and what are the various categories of drama. So, tragedy has already been discussed, and today I will discuss comedy. Alright? So, what is a comedy? Of course, something that arouses our humor, something that arouses our laughter is known as comedy. Now, a comedy is a narrative or dramatic composition which aims at creating comic effect, as I told you. Comic effect. Right? Through the selection and arrangement of certain incidents or through the discomfitures of the characters. Discomfitures, how these characters present themselves and how they arouse our laughter. Okay, that is what it is. Now, as far as the essential features of comedy are concerned, I'll quickly read it because that is not what is important. But what are the important aspects as far as comedy is concerned? That is what we will discuss in detail. So just let's give a quick reading to it. While tragedy is intended to create pity and fear or sympathy, comedy is meant to amuse us. So we can draw a distinction. It says, what does tragedy do? It arouses our pity and fear. And what does comedy do? It amuses us. Right? In some cases, it aims at improving the society by satirizing certain aspects. So, satire is also one aspect of comedy which is used to improve the society through the representative characters. While the characters in tragedy belong to upper strata, the characters here, they belong to upper strata, and in comedy the characters, they belong to middle or lower class. Okay, who? The characters. The atmosphere in comedy is light and mirthful. In certain kinds of comedies, there are tense moments too. And there are examples which you can read of not very great importance. Now, both tragedies and comedies used to be written in verse. Shakespeare uses both the medium, that is verse and prose. ये हमने पहले भी पढ़ा है जब हमने tragedy पढ़ी है कि prose में क्या लिखा जाता था and verse में क्या लिखा जाता था. So, comedy is written in verse as well as in prose. In works of Restoration dramatists such as Congreve, prose became medium of speech with all characters. In subsequent ages, the playwrights began to choose prose as medium for comedies. So basic distinction which you have to remember is that as far as tragedy is concerned, it arouses the feeling of pity and fear. As far as comedy is concerned, comedy amuses us. It arouses our laughter. Second, the characters in tragedy are generally people who belong to upper strata of the society, and over here the characters in comedy are middle or people who belong to middle or the lower class. And as far as medium is concerned, it is written, both these are written in verse as well as in prose. So this is something which you should keep in mind as far as essential features of comedy are concerned. Now, when we talk of comedy in general, there are certain things which we have to keep in mind. So, I'll be using this diagram given here, that how comedy works. That is what you have to understand. That is what is important, because as far as other aspects are concerned, that what are types of comedy, that all is based on this aspect, that how comedy actually works. So let us find it out. Now here are some important points as far as comedy is concerned. Okay, so what happens? A comedy generally accepts the social and moral orders. It follows it to the core. Then it arouses humor even in the abnormal situations, it arouses humor, which means it arouses our laughter. Then it focuses on ordinary subjects and issues, followed by comedy works through humor, satire, wit and irony. Now this is something which you will have to understand. Now as far as humor is concerned, how comedy works with that, how does it work with that? So there are situations and characters that amuse us. In this way, comedy arouses our humor. Okay, I am trying to explain you that how comedy works. It works through these four aspects, and now I am elaborating upon it. I am trying to explain you how it works. So, as far as humor is concerned, through the humor, it takes situations and characters that arouse our humor. Then, as far as irony is concerned, you understand the difference? Do you understand the meaning of irony? If I give you a sentence, say for example, the fire station is burning. This is ironical. Reality is different from appearance. Okay, that is what irony is. So, how irony is used? Difference between reality and appearance. This is your irony. As far as satire is concerned, how it uses satire? With satire is used to ridicule किसी चीज को एक down level पे दिखाना. That is to ridicule something. Say for example, society में कोई vice है, vice, evil that exists in the society. Say for example, caste system. Through the use of satire, that particular evil in the society is ridiculed. Then wit is generally a comment, okay, a comment which has an intellectual appeal. So this is how comedy works at these four, uses these four aspects to arouse our humor or arouse our laughter. Now these I have shared with you important points. Now let us see humor. It says the comic writer finds humor in situations and characters in order to amuse us. Humor may be genial, gentle or pungent. Pungent, sometimes you feel that this is a very nonsense kind of humor, which is, not acceptable. But then the comic writer uses it to arouse our laughter. Satire is used to ridicule something or somebody in an amusing way. If satire is used properly, without hurting someone's feeling, it achieves its purpose. Why? Because it is used for a comic effect. Then wit is a brief, deft, that is a comment, as I wrote here. It is a comment on it produces a shock of comic surprise. It is intellectual in appeal and is used by sensible characters like Rosamund in As You Like It. Now, As You Like It is a popular comedy written by William Shakespeare, and we have read Blow, Blow Thou Winter Wind, that small song from this comedy. And last aspect is irony. Irony is used by comic writer to bring out the difference between reality and appearance. When put to good use, it amuses the audiences. So what you have to remember, that comedy works through these 4 aspects. It works through humor, it works through irony, it works through satire, and it works through wit. Now next and the last part as far as comedy is concerned is the types of comedy. Now there are, we can divide comedy into 2 convenient forms, the classical and the romantic. In the classical forms of comedy, like its tragic prototype, the classic rules such as observance of the 3 unities are followed. In romantic comedy, represented mostly by Shakespeare's comedies, these old rules are generally ignored. Comedy in English is, however, divided into 5 main types on the basis of their basic nature, temperament, and function, respectively. So now let us learn about these types of comedy. And as far as these 3 unities are concerned, 3 unities of place, time, and action, I have discussed this in tragedy, but again I'll mention it to you what it is. These are the 3 unities: unity of time, unity of action, and unity of place. Now these are conventions, rules, जैसे कि मैंने tragedy में भी आपको बताया था, which were followed by traditional writers of tragedy and even traditional writers of comedy, classical category जो है comedies की. But as far as the writers after Shakespeare or even Shakespeare is concerned, they have not used these conventions. Now when I say unity of time, it simply implies that time should be limited to 2 or 3 hours and not more than 1 single day. Okay, that is unity of time. As far as unity of action is concerned, it simply means that there should be a proper beginning, a middle, and an end. There will be no subplot and no exaggerations. The action will be logically constructed. Okay, so this means 1 hour or day. ये हो गया आपका यूनिटी ऑफ टाइम. यूनिटी ऑफ एक्शन हो गया आपका बिगिनिंग, middle, and end. And last, unity of place, that action should take place at a, let us say, single location. But if you have read about Shakespeare, you know that his dramas, they move from one place to another, from one setting to another, from one location to another. So these are 3 unities of action which are used in tragedy as well as in comedy, but only by traditional writers or the classical writers of comedy as well as tragedies. But as the playwrights of the 16th and 17th century, restoration जो मैंने पढ़ा अभी यहाँ पे आपको, restoration के writers हैं 17th century के, so they all break away from rules, they all broke away from the rules, from these conventions, and they did not followed it. अगर हम शेक्सपियर की बात करें, मैंने tragedy के notes में mention किया है that his drama had 5 acts and there was a main plot and there was a subplot. So these conventions have not been used by them. I hope this will be clear to you what 3 unities are. I have shared the notes of this, but I think I missed upon this as far as the lecture on tragedy is concerned. So I have told this to you now. Next are the types of comedies. The classical and romantic are the basic categorization which I have already told you. Now on the basis of nature, temperament and function, we have 5 types of comedy: romantic comedy, comedy of humors, satiric comedy, comedy of manners, and we have farce. Now what they are, let us see. First, romantic comedy. The Elizabethan dramatist, 16th century dramatist. Let me just make space for adding things. I will rub this also because ये categorization is not that important. उसमें आपको classical or romantic में you just need to remember that classicals they followed 3 unities and the romantics they did not follow that. Now as far as this type is concerned, Elizabethan dramatist he's saying. Elizabethan dramatist में ही आपके शेक्सपियर भी आते हैं. They are the dramatists of 16th century. Evolved this type of comedy from the contemporary prose romances. Contemporary means present times. Here, present times of the 16th century. Such as Thomas Lodge's Rosalind. So the example that is given here is Thomas Lodge's Rosalind. This will be underlined. What are the distinguished features of romantic comedy? The main theme of romantic comedy obviously will be love. First feature. The course of love has its ups and, I'm using short form, ups and downs. Life does not run smooth for the chief characters. And the setting is in a remote romantic world. Remote हम generally village angle को भी बोलते हैं. Village life को we call remote areas. All difficulties are solved and hurdles removed in the green world. That is in the place, in the setting of the novel, in the nature, let us say. Next. Real love triumphs and lovers have a happy union. And then the play ends on a happy note. The evil is punished or is forgotten. Evil is punished. So simple enough, as the title says, romantic comedy, love remains the main theme. There are ups and downs in the life of the lovers. There is the villain and the setting is generally remote village life. They have, the lovers, they have a happy union. At the end, everything is well and happy when the things end. And the villain is either, or the evil is either punished or he is forgiven or forgotten. So these are the main features as far as your first type, that is romantic comedy, is concerned. The boy meets the girl, this is the plot generally of the romantic comedy, continues to be staple formula for many writers and filmmakers. Shakespeare's As You Like It is the most important example or representative of this romantic comedy. As You Like It. This is the most representative of romantic comedy. A better example, so to say, than Thomas Lodge's Rosalind. Okay? So this is your romantic comedy. The second type of comedy is comedy of humors, which was started by Ben Jonson. He was an English dramatist. Let me say playwright. Playwright की spelling. Now you know his comedy of humors, as the name suggests, it has doctrine to it. Let me just read it so that it is clear to you. A theory of medicine to it. It has. Ben Jonson and Elizabethan playwright again. So Elizabethan. Which century? 16th century. developed a kind of comedy which had its base in a theory of medicine, according to which a person's temperament gets distorted when he has an imbalance in the imbalance in the four fluids in his body. And what are those four fluids? Blood, phalgum, choler, and black bile. Those four fluids are called humors. That is why comedy of humors. So what he's trying to say, जैसे कि हम आयुर्वेद में बोलते हैं वात पित्त, है ना, ये चीजें बोलते हैं हम, तो उसके बेसिस पे क्या होता है? On the basis of these humors, एक ह्यूमन बीइंग का टेम्परामेंट डिसाइड होता है, right? So on this was how the comedy of humors was written. So if a person is cheerful and positive, he has predominance of the humor called blood, right? So what were the four humors? Blood, phlegm, choler, and black bile. So depending on these humors was decided the nature of the person, the temperament of the person. And if there was more blood, the predominance of blood was there, then the person was cheerful and positive. Okay, so based on these humors, the temperament of the person was decided, and that was what was done in the comedy of humors. The most popular comedy of humor, obviously written by this great man. The title of the play is Every Man in His Humor, and he also wrote another play after this, Every Man Out of His Humor, by Ben Jonson. A person can similarly be phlegmatic, choleric, and melancholic. In Jonson's comedies, such humor characters are used, and their eccentric behavior, eccentric is this, okay, is based, often gives rise to comedy. Eccentric is generally a person who behaves like a madman or who is failing to understand certain situations, certain things. Jonson's main aim was to satirize weaknesses and eccentricities. Eccentric different hota hai, eccentricities is different, okay? Madness in individuals with a view to reform the society. So through the use of these humors, he wrote this play to bring about change in the society. And Every Man in His Humor was written in 1598 by Ben Jonson, is the most representative of comedy of humors. Very easy, very simple. Every Man in His Humor by Ben Jonson. Then next is your satiric comedy. Third category was the satiric comedy. And what is satiric comedy? As the name comes from satire, it says comedy which is specially designed to satirize those persons' views or doctrines. Now see, not just the person, but what is being satirized? Person are being satirized, views are being satirized, and even doctrines. We can call it views or doctrines, which are variations that are taken, deviations from what is considered normal and acceptable. A change, a shift from what should be normal is what he means to say over here. What was or who was being satirized? People who were deviating from what was normal, what was considered acceptable, let us say, by the society. Greek dramatist Aristophanes. Okay. Aristophanes was earliest writer of this comedy. So he was a Greek writer, and his comedies ridiculed political, literary and philosophical matters of his age. So that is what he satirized. What areas he took? He ridiculed politics, he ridiculed literary or literature, let us say, and philosophical matters. This is what Aristophanes did in Greek when he wrote satiric comedies. And as far as England is concerned, again, the best known dramatist, the one who started comedy of humors, Ben Jonson. We all will check whether this Johnson takes an H or not. Okay, we will check it. Ben Jonson in England. Ben Jonson was again the best person who wrote satiric comedies. His comedy Walpole. This is in our course in PG. His well-known comedy satirizes man's lust for money. Right? And The Alchemist is one of his best plays. Walpole बोलते हैं, pony नहीं बोलते हैं. And Alchemist. The Alchemist है. Alchemist. The Alchemist is one of his best plays that ridicules quackery and gullibility. Quackery on one hand and gullibility on other hand. Now quack is generally a fraud, right? But quackery is, it means dishonest practices, and dishonest practices especially related to medicine, I would say. If you see the meaning, it says that medical methods which do not work, and there are places where I have seen examples that they have given the example of homeopath. They say that it is more of a mental a mental satisfaction that you are taking a homeopathic medicine and it is curing you. So in this age, people like Ben Jonson, they criticized a homeopath. That is why he's saying in The Alchemist, he criticizes or ridicules practices of quackery on one hand and gullibility. Gullible, who is the person who is gullible? Who comes very quickly in the talks of others, जिसको जल्दी बहला फुसलाया जाता है. That is, those are gullible persons and gullibility. Okay, so this is the satiric comedy. In Greek it was Aristophanes, and in England it was Ben Jonson. Now this is followed by comedy of manners. As the name suggests, पहले हमने क्या पढ़ा? हमने पढ़ा comedy of humors, and now it is comedy of manners. If we see the name, with the name we can try to get an idea what comedy of manners would be all about. The origin of the comedy of manners goes back to new comedy of the Greek dramatist. Now we are doing comedy of manners. Again, Greek dramatist who started new comedy, and his name was Meander. Right? Which was later developed by Plautus and Terence. They were great playwrights of Greek dramatist, Roman playwrights in the 3rd and the 2nd centuries. Shakespeare's, which comedy of manners Shakespeare has written? Love's labor lost, and much ado about nothing. Shakespeare. Okay, so these are comedy of manners. Comedy, it started with the new comedy in Greece by Menander, Roman writers Plautus and Terence, and these two great works by Shakespeare. Now, what is comedy of manners? It is a kind of comedy that highlights well-defined, peculiar manners in whom? Character. Manners in characters. Which characters? Characters in the comedy, in the play. In the Restoration period, it became very popular. Among its well-known features are stock characters such as the clever servant or the wealthy rival. Intriguing relationships, intriguing उलझे हुए जिसको बोलते हैं, between men and women of the sophisticated upper class society. Then witty and brilliant dialogues, verbal fencing matches, arguments I would say. Then the violation of accepted norms by would-be wits, jealous husbands, foppish dandies, etc. The comedy of manners almost stopped in early 19th century. It was revived by A.W. Pinero, Oscar Wilde, you must have heard the name, J.B. Shaw, George Bernard Shaw, and some other writers of the modern era. Modern era, we would say 20th century. So it came to an end at one point of time. He's saying ceased in the early 19th century, and then it was only revived in the 20th century by great writers like Oscar Wilde or J.B. George Bernard Shaw. They revived what? They revived comedy of manners. Now the last type of comedy, that is farce. Farce is a low-level comedy which aims at creating boisterous laughter. It creates a lot of laughter or belly laughs. If I have to give you a simple example, not from the plays, but the show by Kapil Sharma is one of the best examples of farce. You can understand, you can't understand farce better than this. The best example I can give you. Through highly exaggerated and caricatured types of characters in improbable and ludicrous situations, it makes free use of physical bustle and cosplay. Farce is usually a part of a complex form of comedy as seen in Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew and The Merry Wives of Windsor. They are giving you more examples with which it will be more clear to you. Charlie Chaplin, or I'm forgetting the name of that comedian, Mr. Beans. Mr. Beans is yet another example of farce. Okay, so Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew and The Merry Wives of Windsor. These are farces written by the great dramatist William Shakespeare. Okay? Many films by Charlie Chaplin are best examples of farce. They are excellent farce. Farce continues to be a part of plays, films and TV shows even in our times, though it is not liked by sophisticated people who look down upon it as something vulgar and cheap. There are many other forms of comedy. Okay, so this is all about farce. You have to remember this. And I have given you two more examples. Charlie Chaplin, his films, okay, and Mr. Bean's, and even our Mr. Kapil Sharma show, right? Now next he says, there are many other forms of comedy. Black or dark comedy is one which deals with subjects that are considered serious or taboo in comic manner. Popular themes of this type of comedy are death, violence, disease, sexuality, religion, and barbarism. Then there is what we call blue comedy, which deals with such crude topics as nudity, sex, and bodily fluids. So dark comedy and blue comedy, but then they have not been able to carve out a place as these types have been. So we have elaborated upon that. Now, when we categorized drama, there was another third category that was just little mentioned in the book when I was discussing with you drama, and that is mix of tragedy and comedy. What is it? Tragedy. Again, our Shakespeare has written tragic comedies, right? So we can take it as third kind of drama. Tragedy, comedy, and tragic comedy. Tragic comedy is a mix of both tragedy and comedy, though it should be regarded as another form of comedy. Remember that. Another form of comedy, that is tragicomedy. यहाँ हमने types पढ़े, उसके बाद हमने two more types पढ़े, that is dark comedy and blue comedy, and here comes the third one, that is tragicomedy. It has serious action which moves towards a tragic disaster. To the protagonist, but turns out happily as a result of some discovery or an abrupt reversal of circumstance. So 90% of Bollywood movies are the best examples of tragic comedy, because here everything has to turn out to be happy. All's well that ends well, even Shakespeare has said. So I cannot give you a better example than this, because I'm sure the examples that are coming, you would have not known about them or read about them, but I think the Merchant of Venice you must be studying these days. Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice is the best example of tragicomedy. It has characters from both high and low sections of society. As the action in the play progresses, it becomes serious, developing into a threat to the protagonist's life, Antonio's life. But this is abruptly reversed by Portia's brilliant and clever arguments. Antonio's life is saved, and by the end, the clouds of sorrow and grief totally vanish. The play ends on a happy note for all except Shylock. You'll be reading this play, आपको ये clear हो जाएगा उसके बाद. And there are two another tragic comedies that Shakespeare has written. One is Cymbeline, and the other is The Winter's Tale. We had Winter's Tale in our course when I was doing my PG. The Winter's Tale. So these are two tragic comic plays. As the name implies, The tragicomedy has a double plot, one serious and one comic. It is of course in violation of the classic rules expounded by Aristotle and other writers. Now if we have to, he said classical rules. Classical rules kya the? Don't forget ever the unities that were followed by the writers, the classical writers, and of course they also followed what we call the chorus. But in these plays, in the modern plays, or even in these plays of the 16th century tragicomedies or other comedies, when writers wrote it in the 16th century, they break away or they did not follow those conventions of writing play or writing drama. So with this, your topic drama comes to an end. 80% of the chapter has been shared with you. I have made the handouts, I have shared it with you. Now this last half, the part of comedy, I want you all to prepare your notes and keep them handy with you. After this, we move on to the next literary form, that is fiction. Now first I did poetry, after that I read the poetry that was in your course, that is daffodils. Now you do not have a drama, so I move on to the next literary form, that is fiction. Listen to it carefully, make your notes, try to understand things, because this is something theory. You cannot apply your logics, but you have to understand it and follow it. That is all for today. Enjoy yourself.